Uh, all right. I wanted to talk a little bit about, actually, I'll be really honest. We could do 90 minutes on parallel between the Joseph story and the book of Esther. Um, but we won't. But I would like to give you a little taste of the connections there, and also I think a theme that I think we see in the Hebrew Bible. So I'm going to start us back. Something we didn't read today, but we did talk about on Tuesday night, I believe, and that is the beginning of Miketz and Joseph being brought to Pharaoh in order to interpret Pharaoh's troubling dream. And of course, we remember that Joseph basically nailed it, interpreted the dream, and accurately predicted that Egypt would be facing 7 years of bounty followed by 7 years of famine. And even though the Pharaoh didn't know for sure that would come to pass, he had great confidence in the prediction that Joseph gave him, which I think speaks a lot to Joseph's Joseph's ability and perhaps his charisma. But so what happens here is let's see. We'll start with verse 39. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is nothing so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my court, and by your command, all my people shall be directed. Only with respect to the throne shall I be superior to you. Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I put you in charge of the land of Egypt. And removing his signet ring from his hand, Pharaoh put it on Joseph's hand, and he had him dressed in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. He made him ride the chariot of his second in command, and they cried before him, Abrek. Thus he placed him over the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, yet without you no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. So here we have Joseph being put into this position of tremendous power in a very powerful land. And the transition is marked, as we discussed last week as well, was discussed in terms of Joseph's attire. So Pharaoh places a signet ring, which is literally a sign, a signature on a ring that would be used, we think, to seal a document, which would make it an official ruling. And then also he was dressed in great robes and very very luxurious, befitting someone of this important social and political station. So clothes make the man, if you will, or at least clothes show us the man, who the man is. So let us take a look. Oh, and more great stuff happened to Joseph, and Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Leaving Pharaoh's presence, Joseph traveled through all the lands of Egypt. So, maybe 30 was a bit more further along in the lifespan then than it is now. But I think we can appreciate that 30 is a very young age to have achieved this level of authority. So let us jump to the book of Esther. So we have this story of Esther. First off, Esther and Mordecai being in Jews in exile, and there's a lot of story that we hear every year at Purim, and I won't go through the details now. But Mordecai is not only Esther's advisor, uncle, but also he eventually achieves a position of great power after Haman. Ooh. So here in Esther, in chapter 8, verse 2, the king slips off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther put Mordecai in charge of Haman's property. So we have the transition of the ring. And then a few verses later, Mordecai left the king's presence in royal robes of blue and white, with a magnificent crown of gold and a mantle of fine linen and purple wool. And the city of Shushan rang with joyous cries. The Jews enjoyed the light and gladness, happiness and honor. And then in the next chapter, for Mordecai was now powerful in the royal palace, and his fame was spreading throughout all the provinces. The man Mordecai was growing ever more powerful. And the book of Esther ends. It's just 3 verses in the last chapter of Esther, so chapter 10. King Ahasuerus imposed tribute on the mainland and its islands. All his mighty and powerful acts and a full account of the greatness to which the king advanced Mordecai are recorded in the annals of the king of Media and Persia. For Mordecai the Jew ranked next to King Ahasuerus and was highly regarded by the Jews and popular with the multitude of his brethren. He sought the good of his people and interceded for the welfare of all his kindred. So I just wanted to share this just to one point out the connections between the story of Joseph and the story of Esther and Mordecai in the book of Esther. And because we've been kind of looking at sort of from a literary perspective how clothing is a sign in the text of a changed status, and so I wanted to show how that plays out also in the book of Esther. So I guess this is sort of a literary observation, but I will close it with one perhaps a bit more what's the word I'm looking for? A bit more sermonly, and here it is. God shows, it seems that in throughout much of the Hebrew Bible, so in Torah and then here later in the book of Esther, God shows God's favor sometimes, and God's and perhaps the opposite of God's favor through the actions of rulers. So basically, when a king identifies a person of having as being worthy of a powerful station, and gives them the symbols that go with that, it is I think it can often be interpreted as the king acting in a earthly manner, in a way that God would act, in terms of recognizing a person's goodness and a person's merit, and rewarding them for that. Doesn't always work out that way, but it is often a theme. So that's what I wanted to point out. And I would love, perhaps I'm making a list that's getting too long to actually get to, but I could imagine I'm spending some time looking at the book of Esther and the connections to Joseph, because we also have people who are finding themselves outside of their land and having to respond to the power that is in place, and both Esther and Joseph become ascendant through the power of the kings in the lands in which they are residing. So I think it's a really, really fascinating parallel. So thanks. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.